Hi, my name is Una Halpin and I work for the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland, SEAI. This is my friend Guzzler, who has a little bit to learn about sustainable energy. So what do we mean by sustainable energy? Sustainable means lasting. We want to be able to use our energy in the future. But we want to do that in a way that doesn't harm ourselves, the world that we live in, and the other people and the wildlife that we share the world with. I'm sure you all know a little bit about energy. We use energy in lots of ways. First of all, we use energy in our bodies. Our hearts need energy to beat and to pump the blood around our bodies. Our brains need energy to think and to control the other muscles and the other parts of our body. We need energy to breathe in. We need energy for all of the parts of our body to work. But that energy can't come from our bodies itself. It has to come from somewhere else. Where do you think that energy comes from? I asked you, where does our energy come from? Well, it can't come from our brains because they need energy. It can't come from our heart because our heart needs energy itself. Our energy has to come from somewhere else, from outside our bodies. So it comes from the food that we eat. Our energy on Earth comes from the sun. Plants like this apple tree can capture some of the light energy from the sun and convert it into chemical energy to help the tree grow. This process is called photosynthesis. The apple, like other types of food, is a source of chemical energy. When we eat the apple, the energy goes into our bodies and it gets converted to different types of energy. So we have heat energy to keep our bodies warm. We have kinetic energy to move our muscles. Kinetic energy is the energy of movement. The important thing to remember about energy is that energy cannot be created or destroyed, but it can change from one form to another. We've talked about the energy in our bodies, but we also need energy to power the things that we use every day, like our cars to drive around, the heating in our house, and the electrical devices that we use. So where does that energy come from? Watch the Story of Energy video to give you an idea.
Many millions of years ago, even before the age of dinosaurs, ancient plants and organisms lived in swamps. As they died, they were covered by layers of mud, sand, and other materials. The great weight of these layers compressed them, turning them into fossil fuels, which we now use today as a source of energy. These include gas, oil, peat, and coal. Today, we use fossil fuels to make electricity, which powers things in our homes like lights, the TV, appliances, the kettle, and hot water. We use gas and oil to heat our homes, while petrol and diesel are used to power most of our transport. When fossil fuels are burned in the power station, they release a chemical energy inside them, which then turns to heat energy. This energy is used to boil water and create steam, which is used to turn turbines, which generate electricity. Burning any fossil fuels releases a gas called carbon dioxide, or CO2. The CO2 gets trapped in the Earth's atmosphere. The buildup of CO2 allows the sun's rays in, but doesn't let the heat out. So the more fossil fuels we burn, the more CO2 we produce, which traps more and more of the sun's heat. This global warming is causing our climate to change faster than ever before, with more extreme weather events, storms, droughts, floods, and rising sea levels. We need to look at ways to fix this problem. To help stop climate change, we need to reduce the amount of fossil fuels we use. We can all help to reduce the energy we use at home by making sure the heating isn't on too high and turning off the lights and TV when we are finished. We can also walk and cycle rather than using our cars. We need to increase the use of renewable sources of energy such as the wind and seas. They can be used to turn turbines to produce electricity. We can also directly harness the sun's energy by using solar panels for heat or electricity. We can use heat pumps to heat our homes. This cleaner and more sustainable electricity can be used to power cars and other forms of transport, as well as power and heat our homes. We all need to make changes like these to reduce the effects of climate change and ensure a cleaner, greener and more sustainable future for everyone. To find out what you can do, visit seai.ie and remember, your energy matters.
As we saw from the video, most of the energy used to generate our electricity, to heat our homes, or to power our cars and other forms of transport comes from burning peat, coal, oil or gas. These are collectively known as fossil fuels because they are composed of the remains of long dead plants and animals. The video also mentioned the greenhouse effect. I have a little demonstration here to show what this means. I have 2 jugs with the same amount of soil in them. I also have 2 thermometers which are both reading 17 degrees Celsius. I'm going to place a thermometer in each jug with the bulb buried in the soil and leave them out in the sun. This jug will remain open at the top, but this jug will be covered with an old plastic bag. I'll tuck it in around the thermometer and seal it. What do you think will happen if I leave the jugs in the sun for an hour? Will the temperature remain the same in both jugs, or will it be different? Pause the video while you predict what will happen, and remember to give a reason for your prediction. The jugs have now been out side by side in full sunlight for an hour. If I check both thermometers, we will see that the thermometer that was in the uncovered jug is now reading 24 degrees Celsius, and the one from the covered jug is reading 29 degrees Celsius. As light energy from the sun hit the soil in both jugs, it turned to heat energy. Similar amounts of light energy entered both jugs as the plastic film allowed the light energy to pass through. However, in the open jug, any extra heat that was built up simply left through the top. The covered jug acted like a mini greenhouse. Some of the heat energy was trapped by the plastic, so the temperature in that jug rose more quickly. The same thing happens in the Earth. When light energy from the sun hits the dark coloured surfaces of the Earth, it turns to heat energy. Some of this heat energy escapes back out to space, but some of it is trapped around the Earth by gases called greenhouse gases. Carbon dioxide, or CO2, is one of these. We call this the greenhouse effect because these gases act like the glass in a greenhouse. We have seen how our human activities are causing our climate to change. Thankfully, more and more people are realising that we need to do something about this. Climate change is everybody's responsibility. Governments and industry have a big role to play in tackling it. But there are also things that we as individuals can do to play our part. If we can reduce the amount of energy we use in heating, electricity and transport, fewer fossil fuels need to be burned to generate that energy, and lower amounts of greenhouse gases are released into the atmosphere. We are often given examples of actions we can take to save energy at home and at school. But wouldn't it be nice if we could measure the impact of our actions? There are lots of ways to do this, and the SEAI website and the linked Energy and Education website have lots of resources to help you measure, record and reduce energy use in school. We're going to look at one simple way we can measure energy use in school by looking at classroom lights. Do you know how to measure the energy used by a light bulb or any electrical appliance? If you look at any light bulb, you will see the power rating written on it. This is written in watts, W, or kilowatts, kW. There are 1000 watts in a kilowatt. This bulb is 46 watts, or 0.46 kilowatts. When calculating the amount of energy used by a bulb, we use a unit called the kilowatt hour. We get this by multiplying the power rating by the number of hours the bulb is in use. Let me give you an example. Imagine that you had 6 100-watt bulbs in your classroom. The total power of the bulbs in your classroom is 6 multiplied by 100, which is 600 watts or 0.6 kilowatts. Imagine that the lights were left on in your classroom for most of the day. We'll say an average of 4 hours per day. So, 4 hours a day for 180 days is 720 hours. If we multiply the power of the bulbs by the number of hours, that will give us the total units of energy used in our classroom by the lights over a full year. 0.6 kilowatts multiplied by 720 hours equals 432 kilowatt hours. So what can we do with this figure? First, we could work out the cost of lighting our classroom for a year. Your electricity bill will give you the cost per unit of the electricity you are using. This is slightly different for different companies and can go up and down. but it usually works at a little under 20 cent per unit. We will use this figure of 20 cent per unit, or 0.2 euros. Using the figures we used already, the cost of lighting our classroom for 4 hours per day would be 432 kilowatt hours multiplied by 0.2, and this equals €86.40. But what about our carbon dioxide emissions? Do we release carbon dioxide every time we turn on a light switch? With electricity, the carbon dioxide is actually released at the power station where the fossil fuels are burned to produce the electricity. Carbon dioxide emissions from the generation of electricity are calculated for the country as a whole. They take an average figure for each year by working out the emissions from different power stations and the units of electricity they produce. In 1990, 896 grams of carbon dioxide were released for every unit of electricity that was produced in Ireland. In 2018, this figure was reduced to 375 grams of carbon dioxide for every unit of electricity produced. Why do you think the carbon dioxide emissions from electricity generation in Ireland were reduced by more than half from 1990 to 2018? Pause the video and discuss why you think this might be. Back in 1990, a lot of our power stations were burning coal and oil, and very little of our electricity was coming from renewable sources. Since then, a few things have happened. We are still getting most of our electricity from fossil fuels, but we are using more natural gas and less coal. Natural gas is a more efficient fuel that produces less CO2 for the same amount of heat. We are also getting more of our energy from renewable sources such as wind. The amount of carbon dioxide from electricity generation should continue to drop as we use more and more renewables and burn less fossil fuels. Reducing the carbon dioxide emissions from electricity generation is the responsibility of government and the electricity companies, and we can't do anything about that. But we can control the amount of energy that we actually use. So back to our classroom lights. A reminder, in our imaginary situation, we are using the classroom lights for an average of 4 hours per day for a total of 180 days per year. It costs us €86.40 to light our classroom for the year, and using the 2018 carbon emissions figures for production of electricity, we can work out that using our lights produces 162 kilograms of carbon dioxide per year. The same amount of carbon dioxide emitted by an average petrol car travelling from Mizenhead to Mallinhead and back again. What if we started being really careful about turning off the lights every time we left the room and not turning them on at all when it is very sunny outside? Could we reduce the amount of electricity we use to power the lights by half? If we could, what would that look like? The cost of lighting the room would reduce by half to €43.20, and the carbon dioxide emissions would be reduced by half to 81 kilograms. This would be the equivalent of a one-way trip from Mizenhead to Mallinhead. But how do we know when it is bright enough in the classroom to turn off the lights? We can download a simple free app onto a phone or a tablet that will help us to find out. There are plenty of light meter apps to choose from. A light meter app uses the phone's camera to measure the amount of light falling on the phone when it is placed flat on the table. All we have to do is open the app and it starts measuring. Make sure to sit back when the app is measuring so you don't block the light. The light meter app uses units called lux to measure the amount of light. The recommended light level for classroom desks is 300 lux. So if the light meter reads below 300 lux, then we know we should turn on the lights. With a bit of experimentation in the classroom, we can determine when the lights need to be on and when they can be turned off. Sometimes lights near the window can be turned off, but those further away from the window may need to be on. Simply opening the blinds properly can make a big difference to light levels in the classroom. Because of the angle of the sun, most of the light is coming through the top part of the window. So if we open the blinds all the way up, we can make a big difference to light level. So back to our imaginary classroom and the example of leaving the classrooms on for an average of 4 hours per day for 180 days. Our initial scenario would probably look something like this. When the whiteboard is being used, many children can't see because of the glare, so the blinds are pulled down. When the whiteboard is no longer needed, the blinds are left down, but the lights are turned on so that the children can see their books and their copies. The whiteboard is often left on. What if we change the scenario to this? The classroom blinds are opened up fully each morning. If it is a dull day outside, some of the classroom lights are turned on, but only those that are needed to bring all classroom desks up to a brightness level of 300 lux. When the whiteboard is in use, any blinds that are needed are pulled down. When the whiteboard is no longer needed, it is switched off and the blinds opened fully again. Imagine if we could reduce our lighting from an average of 4 hours a day to an average of 1 hour per day. As most classrooms have plenty of windows, there could be many days in the school year where lights are not needed at all. What would this do to our costs and our carbon dioxide emissions? The units of electricity required to light our classroom would reduce to 108 kilowatt hours. The cost of lighting the classroom for the year would now reduce to €21.60, and the emissions would reduce to 40.5 kilograms of carbon dioxide. This would be the equivalent of driving from Mizenhead to Kildare in an average petrol car. There is one more thing we can do. Our initial calculations were based on the old-style incandescent light bulbs, which are still in use in many situations. Each of our bulbs had a power rating of 100 watts. But light bulbs have now become much more efficient. A new 12-watt LED bulb can give the same amount of light to a room as the old 100-watt incandescent bulb. Imagine if we used some of the savings from reducing our use of lights and replaced each 100-watt bulb as it stopped working with a new LED bulb using less than 1/8 of the energy and producing less than 1/8 of the CO2 emissions. The units of electricity required to light our classroom would reduce to 13 kilowatt hours. The cost of lighting our classroom for the year would now reduce to €2.60, and the emissions to 4.9 kilograms of CO2. This would be the equivalent of driving from Mizenhead to Ballydehob in an average petrol car. So just to recap, in our initial scenario, we were using the lights in our classroom for an average of 4 hours per day for 180 days per year. This released a total of 162 kilograms of carbon dioxide over the course of a year. We were able to reduce this figure by making sure to turn off lights when they weren't needed and to not switch them on sunny days. We reduced our use of lights even further by using a light meter app to determine when the lights needed to be on in the classroom. We then put the savings from our reduction of lights into replacing each old bulb with a newer, more energy efficient LED bulb as it ran out. Overall, with all of these measures, we have reduced our carbon dioxide emissions from 162 kilograms of CO2 to just 4.9 kilograms of CO2. And that's only with lights. Remember, this was just an imaginary situation. It may not be possible to reduce lighting by this much, but you can make your own calculations in school. A good idea would be to monitor the use of lights over a full school week without making any changes. Then make the changes and record again. You can do the same thing for whiteboards, computers, or any electrical appliance. The wattage is often printed on appliances themselves and is always in the manual. Electrical retailers also list the wattage of all appliances they are selling on their websites, so you can find average figures even if you can't find your particular model. So now that you've learned a little bit about energy and climate change, maybe you can do some investigating in your own classroom and find out how you're using energy, what is the impact of that, and what you can do to make some changes. Remember that all the resources I've used today, video clips and lots of other lesson plans and resources are available on our website, seai.ie/schools. Goodbye from me and from Guzzler. Thank you.